But I think you are much better equipped as an investor if you have the pedigree and the scars of war to showcase. Because if I look at the conversations I have with entrepreneurs, the most interesting conversations are about the stories, the journey, the failures, right? And I joke and I say, if you haven't had one of those sleepless nights looking at the ceiling, thinking about payroll, you have not had an entrepreneurial journey. It's like a rite of passage.
That was the voice of Mohammed Alzubi, founder and managing partner at MENA Ventures. I am your host, Ali Zwail, and this is the Startups Arabia podcast, where you learn about the Arab startups ecosystem from the best founders, investors, and operators in the region. My guest today is Mohammed Alzubi. Mohammed is the managing partner at MENA Ventures, a pre-seed, seed stage fund fueling tech innovation in the MENA region, especially in Saudi. Previously, he was the managing director of Tharwa Capital, a Dubai-based financial investment and advisory firm focusing on the technology equity markets. He's also led the venture capital practice at Global Investment House, a Kuwait-based investment company, and prior to that, he was the director of technology investments at Dubai Silicon Oasis Authority. And before that, founder and CEO of Sulaf Solutions, a Bay Area-based tech solutions provider. He's worked and consulted for many blue-chip technology companies, as well as being an active angel investor, a member of Sandhill Angels, an advisory board member of LinkSV, advisory board member of Cube.com, and a founding board member of Techwadi. Mohammed is a mentor to many regional companies and an advisor with In5 Incubator in Dubai and Oasis 500 in Jordan. He holds an MBA from London Business School and a BS in Electrical Engineering from Brigham Young University. I know you're going to enjoy this conversation. Mohammed has extensive experience and he's built an opinionated approach to venture based on this experience. So without further ado, enjoy. Welcome to the Startups Arabia podcast. My guest today, it's my pleasure to host Mohammed Alzubi, founder and managing partner at MENA Ventures. I'm very excited for this discussion because Mohammed has huge experience, whether in the Bay Area or in the region, in the startup field. And so I'm going to be digging in to this experience and trying to learn from him through our conversation. Welcome, Mohammed.
First of all, thanks so much, Ali, for hosting me. I'm a big fan of the show. MashaAllah, and you're always sharing tremendous knowledge and helping both founders, investors in the region, and also exposing your international audience to our part of the world, this exciting place that is really thriving now in the entrepreneurial space.
Thank you very much, Mohammed. Without further ado, maybe I thought I'd start discussing your career, and the entry point I thought about is the year 2009. You had studied engineering in the US, you'd lived in the US for a long time, you had a company set up in the Bay Area, you've been angel investing, and then you decide in 2009 to move back to the region and to join Dubai Silicon Oasis. Can you tell me about that time and what informed that decision?
Sure. Excellent. I mean, your first question is a deep question. So you're starting with the bang. Look, I left to the US when I was 17 and came back when I was 36. And at that time, Lillah alhamd, I started building a name for myself as a value add angel investor. First as Muhammad, and then part of a great network called Sandhill Angels, which I'm still a member of. One of the most prolific angel investment groups in the Bay Area, in Silicon Valley. And you reach a point where, are you Muhammad or are you Mohammed, right? And maybe that was truly influenced by, let me step back, by my experience with Techwadi. So I'm one of the co-founders of Techwadi. And one of the earliest meetings of Techwadi happened in my office. And we really asked ourselves, we were called the Magnificent, Seven. It was a great group of diverse people that have an affinity to the region, from the region, Arab and Arab Americans living in the Bay Area. And we said, see, our community just doesn't have a place where you can really come to the Bay Area and feel you're part of, a community, people to reflect on. Um, and when we looked under the hood of this community, we were beyond impressed. It's just hidden under layers of layers. So when you look under the hood, the first engineer in Google, is an Arab American. The guy who invented SSL, or the algorithm, Al-Gamal algorithm, which is, at the basis of us,
Yep. Yep.
Al-Gamal, which is a great, advisor still to the fund up to today. A slew of executives, a slew of VPs, of VCs. And you start asking yourself, Muhammad, I'm from this part of the world. You go to the Bay Area, you do extremely well. The actual raw material is from the region. Why do we excel when we, as a community, when we go to the Bay Area? And for
Yep.
like yourself, when you go and you pay a visit, our community is extremely strong. And it's actually 1,000 times stronger than when I was in the Bay Area. And he started thinking, okay, there's a whole lot of Muhammads in the Bay Area, but what if I come back and create impact? And that was really the genesis, is taking this continuation of value add to the community and saying, what if we've seen the effect of diaspora with other communities, right? And we've seen the effect of going back and adding value. And it was driven just really by a personal choice to go and say, let me see if I can replicate the spirit of Silicon Valley in our part of the world. And at that time, 2009, 2010, Dubai was the epicenter of the space. I mean, there was not much activity, so it was the
Yep.
closest place to be able to relate. People just think capital venture, not venture capital back then, right? It was that early on. So it was we with a wonderful group of people, and we were witnessing the evolution of this ecosystem. Because, like I said, when you were in the Bay Area at that time, looking at the region, looked like a black hole. But when you looked at the individuals,
Right.
the individual level of effect in the Bay Area, you were extremely impressed. Like they say in Arabic, "البلاد طلبت أهلها." I decided to kind of go back and create impact, and it was one of the best decisions I've ever made.
Yeah, it was a great timing as well, because it was like the inflection point in the startup ecosystem in the region.
Yes,
That's when it really started to
yes, yes.
take off. Wonderful. So, also, like, on your LinkedIn bio, you mentioned that you were several times an entrepreneur, had some failures, and then you landed on a winner. And since then, you've become an investor. You've invested in over 120 companies, some of them very successful, several unicorns. How has your time as an entrepreneur informed or helped you as an investor? How does it affect your decision making as an investor?
Excellent question. Look, you can get into the investment world top down or bottoms up, right? So, and especially in the region, you see a lot of players in the VC space that are ex PE, ex bankers, and it's a valid path, right? It's an asset class that a lot of people in finance want to get to and have exposure to. But I think you are much better equipped as an investor if you have the pedigree and the scars of war to showcase. Because if I look at the conversations I have with entrepreneurs, the most interesting conversations are about the stories, the journey, the failures, right? And I joke and I say, if you haven't had one of those sleepless nights looking at the ceiling, thinking about payroll, you have not had an entrepreneurial journey. It's like a rite of passage. So it gives you a layer of empathy. You've been there, you've done that, you've had the darkest of days, you've been through the psychological warfare, the ups, the downs, the days you don't want to get out of bed, the days where you can't wait to get out of bed. So it gives you a reference. They understand you, and you understand them. You've been there, you've done that. Plus, really, insights come from the failure, because you can, all, tide rides all ships, whatever the saying goes. You can succeed by timing a market where everybody's succeeding. But to succeed when everybody's failing, or to do at the micro level wonders where the macro level is tough, is where we're talking before, before the podcast about alpha. This is how alpha in entrepreneurship is achieved. And these insights you get from the failures. You can. They're the most memorable, by the way. When you look back at your
Yeah.
entrepreneurial journey, you remember now that the memory is less painful. You're smiling at it, you're appreciating that. When you were dealing with it, you were hating yours. I mean, it was just a horrible feeling to be in. But when you look back at it, it's the most interesting, the most memorable, the most enjoyable. Really, it's the tough love, the pain that feels good afterwards is, and entrepreneurs want to hear that. They want to know that. Wait a second, um, you know, pivot is a natural thing. As a matter of fact, we have a saying, and or we, at NEMA, if you're still at the original business model after 18 months, we get nervous. We freak out because we think it's in the journey you gain insight. Can't be that good that you got it all right that far in the game, because we all know, especially in early stage, half the assumptions are wrong anyways. So it's
Exactly.
if you're doing early stage, I think you are a much more interesting investor if you've had an entrepreneurial experience. Also, believe it or not, the path from angel to fund manager also adds a lot of value, because angel investment, you're investing with your own money. You've developed that level of gut, and from it, you understand the element of risk, the risk reward, right? But then when you're managing other people's money, how do you institutionalize this thinking? How do you start running? Muhammad the angel is much more aggressive than Muhammad the fund manager. And you have to be.
Hmm.
You have to come from that mentality because the governance is different, the responsibility is different, and it's more impactful on the ecosystem. If fund one doesn't do well, we can't do fund two. LPs won't invest in this asset class, and it affects the cycle.
Yeah, and I mean, tell me more about that difference between angel investing and venture investing. It seems to me that you're saying that you can take more risks when you're an angel because it's your own money. But then again, someone might say, but in venture, if you're not taking enough risk, you're probably not getting that alpha. You're not actually getting into the best companies, the ones that, because they're usually the most contrarian. What are your thoughts about that?
Look, there's no right or wrong answer, right? I'm answering you from my own personal experience. By definition, if you've allocated as an angel a subset of the high value risk capital within your portfolio as an individual, you might make decisions on pure gut that are riskier, right? And you can afford to. You don't have to answer to anybody. But that pathway taught you the risk reward model, right? We already know that
Hmm.
if you're not going to take enough risk, you're just not going to um, hit the winners. And I'll tell you this, for somebody who's invested in companies that became unicorns, if anybody tells you pre-seed, this one is going to make it, this one is not, I don't know if they've had extensive experience um, in this asset class, because believe it or not, the ones I thought was a sure slam dunk failed, and the ones I thought were, you know, at the time, the ones that
Yep,
I
yep,
thought were okay, it's an acquisition play, it's a nice lifestyle play, it's a $50 million company, etc. Um, took off, became phenomenal. So we just don't know at that level. Plus the value add, right?
absolutely.
I'd be kidding to you if some of our portfolio, Salla, right, is on a path to a unicorn. The level and the support that they need is no longer within the realm of an early stage fund. So you also understand where you can add value and where you don't, where you have to pass the baton to the late stage players. So understanding your lifespan engagement with a startup is just as important, just like how angels need to understand their lifespan. And that's why we spend a lot of time as VCs making sure that the previous angels understand the asset class. All you need is one bad apple to screw up the whole, basket per se. But there is a difference. There is a difference in institutionalization plus the decision making, right? I mean, you have an IC, you have sounding boards. You want to make sure you democratize the thought process. And again, there's no right or wrong answers, just a different way of approaching. But the angel path helped me understand this as because at the heart, I mean, I was an electrical engineer, right? Engineer that turned in engineering manager, that turned entrepreneur. One of the entrepreneurs did well, put in a few bucks in my pocket, and us geeks, we don't know what to do our money. So we start investing in other geeks. And you learn so much. I mean, I'm so thankful for the first angel investment I did because it was literally, classic what not to invest in. It was a solo founder. It was from academia that was so rigid and set in stone. I don't need any support, zero coachability. I know what I need to do and not thinking about the market, commercial. I mean, it was what not to invest in. Check, 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 check.
List.
And I'm so thankful for that 25K, the best 25K I've ever spent in my life, because it's taught me, and some lessons you got to pay for it. It's just, you got to go through the school of hard knocks to pay for those. What not to invest in. So today in NEMA, we invest in teams with complementary skill sets that have role clarity, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, of course, angel investment experience makes you a better venture capitalist. Plus, you get to walk the walk, right? I mean, I'm
Yep.
I'm one of the, I'm a big investor in NEMA's fund. So, I'm that
Mm.
meme of Spider-Man looking at Spider-Man. So I'm the GP and I have an LP stake in the fund. So,
Yep.
right. So, and that's skin in the game. LPs want to see that skin in the game
Absolutely.
in your own fund that you're managing.
Yeah, that's a good segue to go actually to start talking a bit about NEMA, which you founded in 2019. What's the founding story and the thesis for NEMA Ventures?
Uh, Very interesting question. So again, at the time, I was living in Dubai at the time, and I start seeing um, significant activities and nuances happening in Saudi Arabia. And most notably, my participation in GITEX at the time. And I remember that in previous GITEX events, and GITEX is like CS Las Vegas for your international audience. Um, you know, the participation in the region in terms of on the entrepreneurial side. Remember, we used to. You mentioned my first experience in Dubai with Silicon Oasis. We used to be big sponsors of GITEX, and I'd see that the representation of innovation in GITEX and the startups was minimalistic, right? You'd see VARs and people selling racks, and fast forward to 2018, and there was a massive section for entrepreneurship, and 60% of that was the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. And there's a saying that say if you want to be a rancher, you go to Montana. And I, internalized and said if you want to catch the next entrepreneurial revolution, you need to head to Riyadh. And it was an assumption, it was a thesis that there's enough deal flow to justify institutionalizing my night job at the time. I never stopped angel investing, by the way, is to make the night job of angel investing the day job of venture cap. And I thought there's not enough deal flow to be, vertically focused. So let's be sector agnostic in terms of the tech. With that being said, let's avoid content, gaming, etc., and focus more on transactional stuff. Show me a product or a service for a real or a dirham or a dinar or a guinea, and look at early stage investing. That right, and we had a tagline: we precede, you proceed. Which we made T-shirts on, and it was the tagline, etc. And honestly, back then, if you asked me, is there enough deal flow? I tell you, I don't know. Today, in 2024, I'll tell you, probably the region needs 30 NEMAs because we're overwhelmed with deal flow. Alhamdulillah, we're at a point where we're getting almost 8-9 submissions a day. And we've built significant filters just to scale and automate some of that filtration just to scale. So it was under the premise, does the region or can the region justify a dedicated and focused early stage fund. And in Silicon Valley, you'd see something which I fully support, is you see players playing in specific lanes, right? And they build big funds, but they stay early stage or late stage or mezzanine, or but they play within that. If there is a bigger fund, they have more partners. They try to get bigger geographies within Silicon Valley, within the US. And I thought, let's stay within that lane of early stage, and let's be disciplined around the asset class in terms of the band, but be sector agnostic, and let the deal flow kind of take us to places where we build that expertise per se.
Wonderful. And one of the things I noticed on your website is your emphasis on team. So it's like, forget it. If you're a solo founder, don't even reach out to NEMA Ventures. I mean, that's not literally what's written there, but that's the ethos. So, I mean, no matter how great of solo
Yes.
founder, you would never invest in. I mean, why that?
I mean, look, there's always exceptions to the rule and to the pedigree of the founders themselves. And by the way, this applies not just to them. I mean, I want you to look at when YC invests in a solo founder, right? What the level of experience, and usually they have significant track record, repeat founders, already have relationships, XYC. Um, it's a beyond impressive pedigree to make a bet on. But again, I want to also emphasize this is a NEMA problem, not an ecosystem problem. There is no right or wrong answer, but we believe in the school of NEMA that entrepreneurship is a team sport, and we're of the school of thought that a good seller is not a good operator, is not a good So we want to see who's the seller, who's the doer, who's the operator, and we'd love to see this is a tech startup. There's somebody responsible for supply and demand. They're out of the building. They're engaging with customers, engaging with suppliers, getting the word of mouth, doing the sales, doing the marketing. And at the same time, they have a counterpart that is coding that, vision, putting that vision into code and tech. Now, in Silicon Valley, you don't have that problem. As a matter of fact, you have the reverse problem. You have technical founders and co-founders coming together, and then we have to tell one who's going to step up and become the seller, right? In MENA, you see the other way around. You see phenomenal business people, but not enough technical co-founders. And we tell them it's like going to play, football with your leg broken. How can you be a technology startup without having the native technologists? Right? And again, I want to reemphasize there are great success stories of solo founders. As a matter of fact, there's a book, the super founder, that tells you, depending on the analytics, but even statistically, a team will always outperform a solo founder because just, and from my entrepreneurial days, you just don't have enough time.
It's hard.
Right. And,
Yeah.
and I think there is a power of building on the learning. So if you're one day selling, the other day you're worrying about DevOps, the third day you're handling operational elements, the fourth day you're selling, you're not building on that knowledge. So if you're Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday selling, or Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday doing or operating, the aha moments, the insights would come quicker, sooner. And that's what you want, right? You're going with these MVPs to collect the data, to come back and really build the product that the market wants. With a team, it's easier. But remember, we say with a team and role clarity, because just as dangerous is a team that doesn't have role clarity. And, we have an analogy of planets. So there's planet sales, planet doing coding, DevOps, front end, back end, and then it's operations. And the champions of these planets meet in this moon, strategize, and then each one goes back to their planet, and they build cities within that planet, right? Sales, marketing, and ops, customers, et cetera, et cetera. But there's defined lines of role clarity, because it's just as dangerous of being a solo founder not to have role clarity, right?
Absolutely.
So again, it's, as the sexy image of the Lone Ranger, on the sunset being that champion is great, but I don't think it's as effective in the entrepreneurial context, because you want to divide the effort and have that clarity.
Yeah, you know what they say, like if you want to go quick, go alone. If you want to go far, go with people. So I mean, teams
And makes
make that
sense.
difference.
Makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. And how do you guys make decisions at NEMA Ventures? What's the
Okay.
process,
So
internal process?
there are multiple layers. So, alhamdulillah, like I told you, we don't have a problem of deal flow, but you get a full diversified list of deal flow, some from the region, from some outside of the region, in regions that we don't want to make a bet on because we don't have any relationships or we don't have syndication relationships, etc. So there's the first layer, a high, broad layer into the deal flow. Then it filters down into more specifics. And this is where we typically, once we see something that is interesting, the team will meet with them, whether it's myself or the investment team, and we have a very specific set of questions that help us define, does this fit within the ethos of NEMA? Is this a true team? Does the cap table reflect a true team? Or you have somebody that says, yeah, we're a team, but I own 99% and my CTO owns, 1% from the ESOP. That to us is a solo founder, right? The cap table
Right.
is there enough incentive for the founders at Series C to stay within, motivated within the game? And that's important to us, right? Because we know that the late stage players pay attention to. And I know from, spending time in Silicon Valley, the top tier funds are asking, do the teams still have 50% at Series C, right? The team as a collective. So I want to make sure that, the early stage investors um, don't win, the battle and lose the war. And in the region versus Silicon Valley, you see that sometimes these mistakes. Sometimes it's not malicious. People don't know what they don't know. So you see an entrepreneur that has a rich friend that gave them 1 million riyal and took half the company. Now both don't think there's something wrong with that, right? It's not like, and we've had these conversations. We've had very tough conversations and sometimes very friendly conversations. They go and say, nobody will invest in this cap table. Right? So
Exactly.
do you want to win the battle or and lose the war? They'll say no. So we help them claw back that equity to a cap table that is manageable, spending time with the founders themselves, because you cannot be inconsistent. You can't have cognitive dissonance. You can't say, I want value add investing and I want NEMA to engage and roll their sleeves and become part of an extension of our, thought process and sit on our boards and, what we call the tough love and study it, but don't want to do it, don't want to believe it. So it will show within our first engagement and we'll tell you, we're hands on. Our job is to make sure that we instill that institutionalization that when our KPI is, are you going to get a late stage check? And we know what the late stage players look for. So want to make sure by the time you're at the tail end of our engagement that you've check marked this. And we've built tools, actually. We've actually built tools at NEMA to help you not run an app, but run a company. Okay. Because, want to make sure, can this team run an actual company, not an application, right? And some of these lessons you learn the hard way, really.
Right.
You just have to do it.
Okay. And that's in the first meeting. And then
No, no,
if
no.
somebody
I'm
passes
giving
that
you,
meeting,
this.
yeah.
So again, there's a first layer, a second layer, and then you have the kind of the GP meeting where we dig deep. And by that time, we've spent a lot of time internally. So when we have that, Zoom with myself or uh, we're gonna go to the nitty gritty. We're gonna go to the heart of the matter. الزبدة زي ما بيحكوا في العربي.
Yep.
At the heart of the matter, and then from that it gets to the DD process and negotiation. And one thing we learned also is that because of this level of governance as a fund, different than an angel investor, for example. Funds usually have side letters, want information, want to sit on your board, etc. So we get a lot of
Right.
that, you know, negotiation early on, because the last thing you want to do is waste the entrepreneurs' time of all this due diligence and then come to the point where they're not willing to accommodate, these terms that differ from an angel investor to a fund. For example, I mean, the angel can invest in 6 competing businesses. It's your right, right? Nema, the fund would never do that. Once we're in your camp, even later on, we see other opportunities within the same space. We've made that bet. We're sitting in your bunker. We're shooting at the competition. And we take this role seriously. I'm helping you business development. One of the biggest roles we have is business development. And not just us, through our LPs. We got 63 LPs. And we're always asking ourselves before we invest, can we affect the top line? Do we have enough relationships and know-how in the market, an extension of our investors? Because we have such a diverse and large investors. People tell us, how do you manage 63 LPs? It's more than your portfolio companies. And we tell them, it's a joy because it's an extension of the value add. And
Right.
they've outsourced to us early stage so they can co-invest with us in later stage, or take it to the next level, later stage opportunities, in a sense that even then, when they come directly on the cap table, we just don't allow anybody. We want to allow people that really can have an affinity to that space, can add value, have the relationships, can consume that product, right? So we want to make sure that our LPs are consuming that specific product that we're making a bet on.
That's really cool. And maybe from there, I'd love to dive into a couple of your investments. You've made over 120 by now, at least
Yeah.
maybe I'm counting.
This is as an angel and
But
as a
one,
GP, by the way. It's not
yeah,
Nema's.
yeah,
Yes.
yes. And I want to go into a couple of them in detail from start to finish, how they went and what you
Yeah.
saw. Maybe starting with one that was acquired recently by NVIDIA, only the biggest company in the world
Yeah.
these days. And,
Yeah.
so if you tell me the details, what you saw in Brev.dev and, how things happened, because
Sure.
I think you invested in 2021 and just 2 months ago they were acquired. It was pretty quick.
Yes. Well, I mean, there's another thing I told you earlier. You would have told me I'd launch a fund, and that fund would be investing in a startup, and that startup would go through a journey and eventually be acquired by this small company called NVIDIA, only the third biggest market cap in the world. I tell you, out of your mind. So it's in the journey, gain insight, but just as interesting as the exit of, NVIDIA is the journey of this startup, and how you engage and you build, the relationship with the founders, and understand and build friendship, right? I met Nader, and again, I told you back to the Techwadi days, I have an affinity to Arab Americans, doing tech solutions and Silicon Valley or in the US. So we're always, well, alhamdulillah, the brand is bringing them to us. So, a lot of it is a pull, not a push. And you create one success story in terms of being a valued investor, and it dissipates through the founder. So a lot of these leads come from the community coming back to us. And, the original startup was actually an out of home startup for the Ubers and the Lyfts in San Francisco. And I thought the innovation was very interesting. So imagine you're booking a ride to a Mexican restaurant A. And what if I tell you, why don't you go to this Mexican restaurant B, and I'll pay for the lift. So there's a lot of innovation, right? Um, and by the way, this company taught us many lessons. One of them is the power of the team and power of having a technical co-founder. And I'm going to segue a little bit because I want to emphasize on this, because I hope a lot of your listeners are entrepreneurs to see firsthand, how do we develop this insight? So COVID hits. You've got company A that has a team with complementary skill sets. Company B, a solo founder, they both get the same insight, which is how do I do something that can help local businesses while everybody's shut down to still engage with their customers and allow their customers to help them out. One of the best ways to do it is, what if my customers buy a service today for, the service to be redeemed tomorrow? Or, for example, I'll buy from, burger joint a coupon that could be redeemed in 6 months. Wonderful, right? Because all these businesses have been shut down. Brev.dev,
Right.
while they're doing OOH, right, out of home, it's a marketing play. Obviously, all the Ubers are left of, it's COVID, it's shut down. Nobody's riding anything.
Yep.
They can sit there or do nothing, or they can go and say, wait a second, what if we develop this quick product, basically couponing for the local businesses? The guys hide in a cave within a weekend, build this product. The local media love it. They get, coverage within the media about, the saviors of local business.
Yep. Yeah.
The solo founder, a wonderful founder, by the way, wasted 3 months negotiating with a dev shop outside of the region to build this feature, and it was not built. And they asked him for like $30,000 to build, which probably could cost two, right? So here's the difference between two insights, the same insight. And one can execute because natively they have the complementary co-founding team with the skill sets, the complementary skill sets, and one don't. One was able to create a side project. It's a hustle, right? It's a hustle from the main product, but it got so much media and attention. But going back to Brev, from that journey, they realized they're solving the wrong problem. So one of the things a lot of developers, and if you've spent writing code, you faced it. The code works beautiful in your dev environment and things are great. And, you're seeing it and it's working. And the minute you push to QA or the minute you push to production, nothing works. So they said, this is such a pain. What if, we're not the only ones facing it? I'm sure it's everybody facing. And we think it's even a bigger problem than what we're solving. At our previous startup, which was the OH Pinot was called. So they said, you know what? We're going to go ahead and do it. We're going to, not do this anymore. And by the way, what was so impressive when you have conviction is you're almost anti-trend. At the time, everybody was bailing out of the Bay Area.
Yep.
And, so they said, we're going to do this new startup. We're not going to apply to YC this time. We're not going to be a YC company. And we're not leaving San Francisco, and we're going to be fully local. So we're going to all live in the same, the exact opposite of the trend at the time, right?
Absolutely.
And I said, if you have that conviction, let's do it. Let's ride. And the idea was, let's go for it. The idea was, what if this is the best analogy, is what if we make your dev environment from being your pet to think of it more like cattle, right? So, it's repeatable. So I'm giving you a dev environment on the cloud. If John or Steve or Jessica or Muhammad are, coding from me and pulling to production, it's going to be seamless. And that was the startup. And they started, hacking along and building that product. And they knew they're not reaching that product market fit with that product, but they knew that eventually, and that's the beauty of the confidence of a team that knows today things are not clicking, but I can see it eventually click. Let me stay at it. Let me keep at it. And they were just obsessed with the product. Now, at that time, the buzzword was AI, and everybody was training their LLMs, and nobody had access to the GPUs, these, NVIDIA, highly desired GPUs. So again, in the journey, you gain insight, going back to, it's the journey. They stumbled on and said, wait a second, we've seen a lot of utilization of our product, not for the dev environment piece, but for the access to the GPUs, right? So if Nader, and the co-founding team sat back and spent 100 years in a conference room, they would have never had that insight. As a matter of fact, in that journey, the market changed. AI became, the thing. So
Yeah.
everybody was jumping on Brev to gain the access to the GPUs. And of course, we always say be so good that you can be ignored. NVIDIA at the time also was looking, how do I build, a more robust software division, development friendly division, and the team and Brev.dev start building a community around the usage and community, even content and engaging that community. So, NVIDIA saw a phenomenal team they're able to, build a development community around. That's Brev. So again,
Wow.
it's in the journey gain insight, confidence that, you just focus and hunker down and do that good job, focus on the product. The good news will follow. And it's again, the power of having a team with complementary skill sets, the pivots along the way, because a team with complementary skill sets can give you the agility to react. You can literally build a feature to address a competitive move in a weekend. Right? You lock your CTO and say, "Don't leave till you push the code." A solo founder can't do that. Or if they do that, it's not the same speed. It's expensive.
Yeah. No, it's incredible, and it's really about getting all those learning cycles. So making the best of your timeline and the
Yeah.
time you have before you run out of money, and being able to respond to your own vision quickly. You find the problem that you're meeting and you solve it. And that's, I guess, that gives you more confidence that you're on the right track, even if things don't click 100% from day one. And of course, investors that believe in you.
Well, let me step back and go to something you asked me early on, which is an investor that used to be a founder. So
Uh-huh.
I went through this realization. I went through a pivot, and probably I went through an extreme pivot. We had a startup that was basically trying to sell you. I mean, I'm a CCIE and I'm a network infrastructure person, and I coupled myself with, back then, I'm going to date myself, there was not significant cloud efforts and, email, exchange email. And we said, what if we go to the SMEs and we give them a Ferrari solution for the price of, I don't want to get in trouble with the brands, a lower brand, car. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
And in a retainer fashion, right? So, we come into these SMEs and we give you a retainer. You have a CCIE network security, and you have an expert in domain, an expert in email, and we're going to come 3-4 hours. And we thought, by the way, the VCs would love it, because now when they invest in startups, we'll tell them, don't let that money go get burned on the IT infrastructure. Let it go to, the business logic, the code for the product they're building. Fast forward 9 months, our customers were Wilson
Hmm.
Sonsini Goodrich, the biggest law firm, Embarcadero Systems, which is one of the biggest operators of West Coast ports, Cisco Systems. We realized, you know, we were in the enterprise business. They needed specific projects to be done. They needed to be
Yeah.
done from consulting budgets because of whatever reason. And we were that solution for them. So, living through a pivot, and this is as 180 degrees, right? You're
Yeah.
doing sending a SME.
Yeah. Totally
You ended
different
up having a
segment.
like Cisco, totally different segment, totally different size. So I lived it. I can relate. I am a product of, in the journey you gain insight. That is not something you can teach. That is something you have to experience, the good and the bad of it. And that's why we can always reflect back as investors in tech to personal experiences. And there's a lot of them, which segues me into something I
Absolutely.
was telling you, which is the podcast. I'm launching a podcast called Awal Sheikh, First Check. that inshallah will be
Mm-hmm.
addressing. We're going to take theoretical topics and translating into, the actual experience that I personally went through, and then bring in,
Right.
a senior entrepreneur to address that experience. So inshallah, we'll launch it soon. Maybe this communicating will put some
Yeah.
pressure
Good
to
luck.
get going with
Yeah.
it.
Put yourself out
But
there.
we see the need. Yeah.
Yeah. Looking forward to it. So, okay. Congratulations on the exit. And
Thank you.
maybe you could tell me on something that's not yet exited, but pre-IPO. Salla that just raised a $130 million round. That's
Yes.
incredibly significant. And can you tell me the story of Salla, how it started, um, when you invested, and why?
So we were not the first check and started. We came at the second funding cycle, and it's really we got into that opportunity by building, a brand around being value-add investors, and got to build a relationship, a great relationship that's still a very strong relationship. And it's always an honor when, one of your portfolio companies end up becoming an investor in your fund, right? That's the ultimate,
Yep.
um, you know, um, testament that your value-add investors. Uh, Look at MENA, we're taking early stage risk by taking execution risk, but we're not going to take business model risk. So we're always looking for the X of MENA. So sometimes the Shopify of MENA. I mean, it doesn't take a
Yep.
genius to know that all these traditional businesses eventually will have to have online presence. And for, to date myself, to be, a 5.9, a 99.99 uptime e-commerce solution. And I'll step back in my, the first job I had, which is, IIS, Integrated Information Systems. We built e-commerce solutions in the .com era, and this used to cost you almost $500,000 to $2 million just on the infrastructure, right? And one of our biggest clients was American Express and Public. And we enjoyed that experience. So my first job, I literally got to experience early employee, not a founder, very early employee to an IPO. Um, is It used to be extremely expensive. The barrier of entry to do e-commerce was the tech, was the infrastructure. I'd sell you these big routers and switches that looked like half fridges, with high availability and redundancy, and it was extremely expensive. Today, you can have an Amazon-like,
Exactly.
you know, uh, window. Right? So there's a lot on the back end that happens in e-commerce, but at least your shopping window for, 110 bucks a month, free sometimes,
Yeah.
depending on what plan. So that barrier of entry went away from being in the tech space to customer acquisition. It didn't disappear. It just went to a different area, which is customer acquisition, getting those eyeballs. So whether it's Senla, whether it's Tamara, the buy now, pay later, the Affirm of MENA, whether it's Calo, the Hungry of MENA, we're always looking for business models that have succeeded. We have a North Star to follow, for the founders to follow. It's just the right, smart execution of these ideas in our part of the world. And trust me, if you think they're copycats, you haven't done their homework. There's so much innovation that you have to do, um, to localize and succeed, naturalize. That's a whole different topic that we can talk about. But I'll just give you some nuances. You know,
Mm-hmm.
tomorrow, you know, buy now, pay later. First of all, they had to take this product and make it Sharia compliant. They had to do a whole lot of the back end. We don't have credit bureaus like we have in the US, Experian,
Yep.
Equifax. So you had to make a lot of that decision on credit worthiness by building your own IP, your own models, your own, and the speed of how you want to react. Kareem versus Uber. Kareem did cash.
Yeah.
Right? Uber,
Exactly.
Kareem did scheduling. Uber was of the school of thought that my product is ubiquitous. I can step out of the street and order an Uber in any second. And he said, no, I want to do scheduling, passcodes for picking up, for your kids. So there's a lot that goes into localizing a product, taking a business model that succeeds out west or out far east and make it MENA compatible.
Exactly. It's not just a copy. It's something much deeper. But you have the benefit of knowing that this business model is going to work because it's worked elsewhere.
Plus, it adds another layer, which is very important to us, which is a path to exit, right? Because all these, I remember, when I was in Silicon Valley and through just the day job of trying to sell and through the Techwadi, everybody's looking at this region, even if you're sitting in Silicon Valley. Again, sometimes we think we're bigger than we are, but because when you're in the Bay Area, you're going to go through the US, and then you got Canada, Mexico, then you're going to get, first beachheads in Europe, the UK, which is great for MENA founders because it gives you a runway, right? They're not going to come knocking on your door tomorrow once they scale beyond their first geography. So it gives you time, but eventually they're going to come. And we're just trying to make it much harder to answer the question, shall I build it versus buy it? Because by definition, just because of the culture of these organizations, they're going to try to build it before they buy it, right? And the examples are, most prevalent is,
Uber
Amazon
Kareem.
with Souk, Uber Kareem, right? By the way, people don't know this, but Amazon had a secretive project in Dubai for like 9 months before they said, yeah, you know what, let's just grab. But they had some experiments, but let's just grab, but let's just acquire it. So there's always a culture of let's build it. They don't want to come and acquire immediately. And it's smart for them because they try to build it, they'll fail, but they gain a lot of data, right? They get a lot of data that they can use
Oh
and,
yeah,
and justify and insights into the region, etc. Uh, so we want to
and
see
negotiating
this,
leverage as well.
and negotiate the leverage. Yes, absolutely. So we don't invest in, if you want to lose us at NAM, I say, this is the most unique business model. We've never seen anything like it. Nobody in the space. We've never seen, who's your competition? Nobody. And we say, listen, if you have a great idea, 5 people have already thought about it. If you have a phenomenal idea, 15 people have already thought of it. So the fact that nobody has thought about it scares us. Um, and and
Yeah,
this is where, going back to the team, there are these centers within the team that have so much insight to their market that they don't just even know the unicorn. They know the startups that are in stealth that are about to launch in their space. So they'll say, oh, Jim or Muhammad or Erica or Salwa
yeah,
is working on the same idea, but we think we're better because da 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 da. And and sometimes I walk in a meeting, third meeting with a startup, and I'm like, "Who's your competition?" And just from simple, research before the meeting, sometimes the first three lists in Google, it says, "Well, yeah." They say, "No, no, we don't have any competition," and I'm like, "That's what we're investing in. We're investing. Do we believe this team has enough insight and experience and understanding of the market and the market dynamics and the competitive landscape to navigate themselves and pivot and morph to win for the now the cash?" That's what we're investing in.
absolutely. Yeah, and it's amazing how many times one hears this. We don't have competition, or oh, that's the first time I hear about this competitor, even though they're the first result on Google and things like that. It's really amazing.
Yeah. It is. It is. Well, they're not going to get a check from us. It's amazing, but we're going to
Exactly.
pass.
All right. So Mohammed, you have so much experience across like the Bay Area. You worked in Dubai, in Kuwait, and now in Saudi. Of course, like startups are startups everywhere, but there must be like specific things that are different in the Saudi ecosystem and Saudi culture. So what's different about doing business in Saudi?
Well, let me step back. Startups are not startups everywhere, right? So that's a mistake I made when I first came to the region. And I think you and I alluded to it before the podcast. Being in the Bay Area is a privilege. If you can sit in a cafe and just listen, you're listening to the next Google when it's a go, the next, Twitter when it's or X when it's a, well, X is one letter. The next Facebook when it's an F.
Hmm.
It's just you can have a conversation with a table in the Bay Area and get some insights. It's just the environment is rich. It's a concentration of super smart people that it develops its own culture and its own common sense. There are things that what startups do, founders should do, how they operate. When you come to this part of the world or anywhere outside of Silicon Valley, by the way, this is, I was in London,
Yeah.
spent some time, and it's not common sense is not as common as you think, right? And it's not that people are less intelligent. It's just they don't know what they don't know. They haven't had the exposure. So for somebody who spent almost 11 years in the Bay Area to come back and make the assumption that they know what's a typical behavior, what's expected, or the knowledge set of a typical startup founder is actually unfair, right? They have not had the exposure or the privilege, really, of being in that environment. Because I remember, and let me tell you how I dealt with it personally. So when I was living in the Bay Area, I was single, and you would say, "Gosh, I wish I can go and learn this at this law firm of a new way of structuring a deal. And one of the fans is doing, a conference around this new technology. And like, I wish I could send my arm there and my leg there. And you're constantly learning. And I don't care how senior you are, you're constantly learning. You're lucky enough to where you become senior enough where you're learning and teaching. Right. And I started doing some of that with the founders, but the learning never stopped. When I went to Dubai straight from San Francisco, I noticed that I'm doing a lot of the teaching and less of the learning, and I felt that gap. That's why I launched, Riyadh, Dubai Tech Nights, which was a gathering of techies, tech enthusiasts, geeks that wanted to come back and over pizza, over something casual, learn something new, because I felt I was, being starved of that privilege of continuing the learning. And then I said, you know what? Let me, us geeks, we always have this problem, or we feel like we're missing that rubber stamp of an MBA, right? That you look at these bios and they say, engineer with an MBA from a top 10 school. So I went in, I said, I'm still single. Let me get that last stamp. And I chose specifically a college in Europe, LBS, London Business School, because I was oversaturated with the US experience and I've already had exposure in the MENA experience. And Europe was a black hole. And a lot of Middle Eastern money managed out of Europe, right? Out of
Yep.
London. So I wanted to get close to the allocators. And it was a wonderful experience. But just to tell you, going back to what I was telling you, the difference is that, by the way, I'm not talking technically. I'm not talking, a front-end developer knowing React or Angular or Vue.
Yeah.
Technically, you might find them at par. I'm just talking about the general knowledge of what a typical startup and a typical founder role, and what's assumed as common knowledge and what's assumed as
Yeah.
the way to operate, the way you conduct yourself, the value of the investor.
Yeah.
You don't have to sell Nama in Silicon Valley, because the entrepreneurs know what the value of a value add VC is. Uh, in this part of the world, you have to communicate that. They'll tell you, why bother? Why just give me the money and I'll run with it, and I know what I need to do, and etc. I'm not saying all of them, just saying it's a function of they don't know what they don't know, and that's important for you to recognize and respect, right? Because you cannot come with this attitude that, what do you mean you don't know? What do you mean that this is not how it is? Right? Um, Now, luckily, we live in an age where all the information is out there, right? The content is all out there. So the hustlers will hustle. the great entrepreneurs will seek the knowledge, will come and and consume a lot of the tools that are going to help you become a better founder, regardless of you engaging. And
Yep.
that's when passion. Does somebody have passion for the job, or not the job, for the path? And by the way, we see it here at NEMA. I mean, I always tell our investment team, if you're coming to NEMA for a job, this is not the place for you. If you're coming to NEMA for a career, this is a perfect place for you in venture capital, because you have to have the drive to go and go to the
Exactly.
demo days and the pitch night competitions and the hackathons, and the night job element should be, hey, Mohammed, can I be on this panel on your behalf, or can I go to this? Uh, if you don't have it, you're going to struggle, because it will show. It will show to your counterpart, the founders, the entrepreneurs, that you don't have that calling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's, I guess, what you're saying is it's just an ecosystem at a different stage than the Bay Area. So it's an earlier stage, which is natural, and that's maybe the key difference. So, Mohammed, I'd like to kind of have you wear another hat. I see that you've been an LP in some funds that are, I
Yes.
think, US based mostly. What? How do you invest in funds? How do you choose funds? How do you evaluate them?
So there are funds that I'm an LP in because I know the GPs. Right? Remember, I was an active angel investor, and some of these investors were, you know, peers and fellow angels, especially at Sahel Angels, and they've taken a natural path, like myself, of making the night job of angel investing, the day job of venture capital. So there's a natural affinity. The other part is, again, once you develop a brand of being a value add investor, uh, it's easier to get the allocation, because they also want insight into your part of the world, right? So I don't invest unless they have some sort of affinity. Do I think
Yep.
that eventually we can have a cross on the path? And the third thing is that, again, I'm quite selective of the funds, and it's actually just had a 2.5 hour conversation. The problem with the Bay Area is that the timing is horrible. So, I'm usually the one doing these calls at night,
Yep.
with great funds in the Bay Area, also for me to gain insight. Right now, I never want to be
Yeah.
conflicted. I never want to, and again, as a GP of a fund in MENA, you have to always put the fund ahead of the person, right? So the first thing I did at NEMA is I gave all my angel investments, when I decided to do NEMA, to NEMA at par. So, and some of them were phenomenal, and they were
Yep.
5x, 6x from what as a matter of fact, Salla was one of them, Tamara was one of them, right? And so
Oh,
you never want to
nice.
be conflicted. And that also adds confidence to the LPs when you go and say,
Absolutely.
I'm giving my, top jewels to the fund at par. It shows that skin in the game.
Yeah.
The last thing I want to tell you is to gain insight, because this is the world is specialized, right? The center of gravity of the next entrepreneurial endeavor and cycle is going to come probably out of the Bay Area, um,
Yep.
and we're seeing it now. I mean, if you
Right.
got engaged in the YC demo day, it seems like 99% were, AI, and half of them were, medical AI, right?
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
and just that's the strategy. So you want to get some insights, right? You want to get some insights in that space, and ways of making decisions. And some of those funds, by the way, are pure analytical. They're making the US has enough breadth and data points that you can
Right.
aggro decision a lot of this stuff. So it's to gain really insights, and to back friends, right? Just like they're backing me, to back friends, and
Yeah.
the camaraderie of the
Absolutely.
the GP ship.
Yeah. And yeah, exactly. I mean, and it's really about trust, that then you're trusting this person with your money to invest on your behalf. So I mean, they're a friend, but they're also someone you've seen operate.
Of course, and then angel invest together. Remember these are
Exactly.
I've seen
Yeah,
it.
exactly.
About trust at Sahel Angels, we were two groups. There were the tech people and the medical devices people, or and the medical
Hmm.
devices people in the medical space. They tended to be older because a lot of them were ex-doctors, right?
Mm,
And when the pitches was in their world, it was a foreign language. We're speaking Klingon, right? But you develop relationships across the aisle. And I remember I had a buddy of mine, and I was gay, and I go, if they gives me the thumbs up, I'll put it's a little amount, but I'm gonna follow their diligence because they're the subject matter expert. And
of
they did the
course.
exact same thing on the tech side, right? They'd say, hey, Mohammed, if I give half, or they'd know how much to allocate. So there is that level of syndication that happens, and this is what we do
Right.
in NEMA today. Any deal that is outside of Saudi, because in Saudi we can look under the hood. First thing we're going to ask you is, do you have a NEMA in your country, in your geography, that we can rely on a lot of the heavy lifting, on the diligence and the value add, right? I mean, early
Right.
stage, a lot of it is about local know-how, affecting the top line. We're your Trojan horse to access the Saudi market or the GCC market. But if you're in
Hmm.
Egypt or Nigeria or Pakistan, where we've made these bets, and they've done, alhamdulillah, wonderful bets. We're about to announce, by the way, an Egyptian deal, so you'll hear
Nice.
about it soon.
Congratulations.
But this was co-led with a wonderful Egyptian VC, right? So this camaraderie is built in, and you develop, even Saudi, develop an affinity to co-invest with certain
Of course.
funds because you share the same ethos and culture and values and
Yeah.
impact, etc.
Yeah. I'm back to trust again.
Yes.
So maybe I'll ask one last like deep question, which is boards. You serve on a lot of boards, and you're also an observer on a lot of boards. Pretty hands-on. What do you think are the characteristics of the best boards? What do founders do to build the best boards?
So I'll first say, we live in a time where there's a lot of content around this, and Bradfeld has a wonderful book
Yep.
about startup boards that I think before you engage boards, whether it's board or advisory boards, go get the content. These are simple YouTube and Google searches that will tell you what is an ideal board, etc. So
Yep.
I'll let that answer that. But from a VC's perspective, and this is what I tell
Hmm.
you, as a founder, you have to be consistent and honest and engaging value add venture capitalists, because are you willing to put an environment where you're listening and learning, and we're listening and learning, and the place where that communication happens is at the board level, right?
Hmm.
Now, of course, they tell you never surprise your board, so you're socializing a lot of the decisions, but that governance or that communication or the tough decisions happen at the board level. And whether you like it or not, as a rite of passage for the successful entrepreneurs, because I've seen the one who've made it and I've seen the ones who didn't. We're the training wheels for you to be able to practice on us, because one day you're going to lose control of the board, right? One day the board is going to drive
Exactly.
decision making, depending when you go public, etc. And the stakes are higher. So we want you to get there. Plus, we know for a fact the late stage players are going to ask, has this entrepreneurial team had experience being governed at the board level? Are they able to come to a board, identify the key challenges of that quarter, that month, drove an agenda to discuss it, create an environment where critical decision make, decisions are being
Right.
made, pass on. The auxiliary things that come with the boards: interviewing talent, ESOP allocation, business development activities, etc. There has to be
Yeah.
that
All these
dedicated
decisions.
time slot that come in. there's constant communication happening, right? There's, WhatsApp groups flying in and out, etc. But look, I'll summarize by saying the ones I've seen make it, made it because they learned the art of keeping their stakeholders informed
Absolutely.
and build the right process of bringing to the table key decisions and acting on them, executing on them, getting buy-in and moving on and going executing, and then coming back, breathing, collecting the data, informing their stakeholders. And that's why we have boards, right? And advisory boards, by the way. I tell founders, don't just stop at boards, advisory boards.
Yeah. Let me give you the contrary view, which I heard from an early stage investor a couple of weeks back. He says, "I've decided to never join boards because for me as a VC, I just get all the governance. I don't need it for the information, and I get responsibility and headache and things like that. And at the end, I can't control anything. I'm a minority anyway." What do you think of his opinion?
Well, there's no right or wrong answer, but again, there's the technical elements of this trade, which is as an investor, especially if you have a sophisticated investment um, instrument, right? There are certain decisions that require the board approval. Some decisions require unanimous board approval. So it
Yeah.
all depends on the level of decision making and how you've what's the shareholder agreement and the articles of incorporation, and what rights your class of share have you affiliated or associated with in terms of the control. We like to lead. We like to lead rounds and put in the right governance, and a lot of that governance
And
happens
you're
at the
very
board. But
hands-on.
you know,
Yeah.
very hands on. So, but again, I want to end by saying there's no right or wrong answer. They're right because that's their approach. Hands off. I'm gonna have a casual call with the founders. They're gonna give me the high level, and our approach is just as valid, right? That's why
Yep. Absolutely.
typically, try to tell the top tier VCs, I'm not going to give you a board seat. They usually want two. They want more than their
Yeah. Yeah.
pro rata
Their fair
allocation,
share.
and that's a condition. Some will actually want to control the board, so they'll only invest because they believe if we think you, the CEO, you, the founder, are not managing our money right, we'll remove you because this is the best outcome to that. Now we're not extreme, and we never want to control the board, and usually we like boards, especially at the early stage we're in, where it's founder controlled. So it's two founders and us, or three founders or two investors. But I think again, if you're approaching it by knowing that my role is the training wheels for the founders, so when they go to the big leagues, they've had the practice, right? They've played the test games. They know how to conduct themselves in a board. They know how to come to a board with an agenda. They know that we give them a tool. We call it Portfolio at NEMA, which is an internal tool that helps identify the monthly KPIs, the global KPIs of the startup, the insights, right, the good and the bad. So they learn the how do you agree to disagree in a constructive manner, right? Because we've
Yeah.
seen first time founders blow up, and we tell them you got to learn this skill. Managing your stakeholders again is a rite
Absolutely.
of passage to make it to the next level beyond NEMA,
To the big leagues. Yeah.
to the big leagues. Yeah.
Uh, yeah. Yeah. That's a great insight and a great touch-off point to kind of be respectful of your time and start to close up just with two final, quick fire questions. The first is, what book do you like to recommend to others?
So we actually tell every founder to read The Lean Startup by Eric Ries, which is reaching out to that
Yeah, the
organization
classic.
and getting like a referral fee, because we're biggest fans of the school of thought that it's in the journey gain insight. The first product is really meant for you to know what you should actually build versus nail it the first time. We lived it. I lived it as an entrepreneur, and I understand the power of insight from the journey and the pivots. You mentioned Brev.dev. I gave you 2 pivots. I haven't given you the full story. Within those 2 pivots, there were 10 others.
Amazing.
So that's a book that I think is paramount in terms of thinking about, how do I
Yeah,
go to market with the right subset.
got it. Okay, I like to close on a note of gratitude. So, what is a gift somebody has given you that has made a big impact on your life?
Look, I mean, I asked myself this question a lot, and we are a product of the little things along the journey that made us. So you can't single one thing, but there were people that are pivotal in my journey as an engineer, and I'm so thankful for making me the engineer that I became, right at the top tier of the network infrastructure side, and then transitioning to engineering management and then entrepreneurship. I mean, I was thrown into it. I didn't know what it is, and maybe that's for another episode. How I started, Sulaf Solutions, for example. And look, I'll tell you this. Sometimes you're, and this was me. I lived 5 blocks from Sand Hill Road. Okay, I was an engineer in the Bay Area, in Palo Alto. Lived 5 or 6 blocks, and I got to know about VCs by having a dinner with a dear friend, one of the co-founders of Techwadi, over a falafel sandwich, walking around Palo Alto, where he told me, "Oh, I had this call with this PE fund, and they're trying to." He was a senior executive in a top team, and I'm like, "PE, what is that?" And I
Wow.
go back to my white keyboard with the white computer. Remember those where it
Yeah,
makes
yeah,
the
yeah.
sound, and 3 days I couldn't sleep. So you can literally be in the epicenter of an industry
Yeah,
and not. So that one conversation literally changed the trajectory of my life, right? So just an example. And by the way, this brings me to the Bay Area. They think that there are hundreds of thousands of engineers that don't want to take an entrepreneurial route, that are happy being engineers, that are, and they're right. They're happy
yeah,
with their path, and it's just as legitimate. And there are people building wonderful careers in an executive path, etc. So I'm thankful for them all, to answer your question, because different stages you needed that different mentorship. Speaking of books,
yeah.
I at the time I was a senior engineer at Excite at Home, and Excite at Home blows up, and you do what a network architect, you go update your resume, and I happened to be sitting in a cafe looking at a book where they had these back then. People that didn't have,
Bookshelf.
it was physical
Uh-huh.
books, right? No, it was
Yeah,
those rotating circular bookshelves, and it
yeah,
was a
yeah.
book called Rich Dad Poor Dad,
Oh,
and
yeah. It's
by
a classic.
and I was reading it, and it was so powerful. Basically, it felt like Robert Kiyosaki, I think his name was sitting there saying,
Kiyosaki, yeah.
"Muhammad, yeah, he's across the
You need to
table
know
from
this.
me. You got to do this." But because, by the way, I read it again, and it wasn't as impactful, because there are certain messages you have to hear at a specific time for a specific purpose. And that book just changed fundamentally that I should not have the next job. I should make my job. And it was the first, segue into which was, not common sense. I didn't know what I didn't know. Going back to,
Yeah,
the
yeah,
MENA founder versus the Silicon Valley founder. Um, so I hope that answered your question,
yeah.
in a
The gift of learning along the way, the right lesson at the right time, always
absolutely.
important, and kind of part of our role as VCs as well, with the founders where we can. Thank you very much for your time, Mohammed. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you so much for hosting me, and can't wait, hopefully, inshallah, to tell you more stories on
Yeah,
more podcasts. Thanks a lot.
absolutely. Thank you, Mohammed.
Take care. Hala, bye bye.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Startups Arabia podcast. If there was something you really liked about what the guest said today, reach out to them on social media and tell them what you liked. And of course, if you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? You don't want to miss any of our great upcoming episodes. Also, please rate us and give us comments on our social media accounts so that we know how to improve. And also tell us what you like. We don't mind hearing that either. Until next time, this was your host, Ali's Whale.